Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we get to talk about Spine 290, The Phantom of Liberty, directed by Louis Buñuel, 1974. This is basically where both Buñuel and his script collaborator, Jean-Claude Carrier, said pretty much to hell with narrative and just kind of do whatever you want. Although it's not completely without form. I would describe that it's more of a dream narrative, where there are dreams where it seems to play in long form, where you have these ever continuing string of events that just go from one place to another, and it's both logical and illogical, and that's the best way to describe it. It's not completely random or purely stream of consciousness. In fact, it kind of functions like a relay race, where one character kind of helps set the stage for the next scene, and then so on. And even the positions can vary, where a major character in one scene becomes a minor character in another scene and then goes back. And so there's lots of there's a flow that way. And allegedly all of this was informed by dreams that both Buñuel and Carrier had, and that's formed the basis of it, and that became this film. So really it's just kind of a string of little, you can think of it as a string of little episodes, sketches. There's definitely the Python vibe, although this came out long after, or not long after, but quite a while since Flying Circus. This came out the same year as Holy Grail, so unfortunately this is an out-of-print title, and otherwise I would go check it out. But I will point out some of the episodes, some of the famous moments that are worth noting. One is very early on, these two children they're out in a park, and then they go to a playground, and they meet this man that looks pretty suspicious, and says, "Hey, do you want to see some pictures?" And gives them to this pouch, and you just see them looking at it. You don't see what they are yet. Since this is out of print, I can kind of spoil things, but I guess as soon as it becomes available in whatever form, if you like that kind of humor, check it out for yourself. But anyways, so they're looking at the pictures, and you don't see what they are yet, but you can kind of go, "Oh, that's really interesting." And then the whole thing is played up as if they were looking at dirty pictures, and the child is even scolded for this. It's like, "How dare you have this? You shouldn't be having this around." And even a maid gets fired because of it. But you do end up seeing what they see, and it's really just pictures of architecture, and they are both repulsed by this and turned on by it. So there you go. There's your Freudian humor right there. There's another moment where a small group of Carmelite monks, you see them play poker using religious medals as chips, which actually is not as blasphemous as one might think. Believe me, I know seminarians. They probably could do a lot worse than that. There's another episode where it's reportedly at a police academy, and the class there's a teacher there that's trying to talk about the arbitrariness and relativity of laws and morals, which you kind of wonder, okay, how do you get into that? Okay, talk about undermining your own authority, but of course that's kind of the point. But the class is constantly interrupted by people having to show up, responding to emergency calls, responding to alarms, and, "Oh, my shift is here." And so it starts to get unruly. And then there's a couple of people that like to pull childish pranks. It's It's basically what would happen if Zero de Conduite or 400 Blows or If were played out by adults. What they would do. There's that. There's also the, I guess you could call it the signature surreal scene in cinema, where, and interestingly enough, this is in the same Unruly class. A professor this is his demonstration about how arbitrary and relative laws and morals can be, and he was recounting a social event, a dinner, where you go in and they sit around on a table and they sit on toilets instead of chairs. And basically it's the roles reverse. You do your bathroom business in public. You do all your defecation, urination, or if you really want to be crass, shit and piss in public view without any kind of reservations. And if you want to eat, you have to do so in private. And you have to say that, oh, the room is occupied as you're eating a plate of meat and bread and drinking some wine. So again, to illustrate the point of how arbitrary laws and morality can be. What one may find disgusting may end up being normal somewhere else. And this is a very Buñuel idea. Another episode I really like, and this is actually a favorite of Carrier's, and I find this very amusing too. There's a moment where this is a completely different set of characters. A mother and father, they get tipped off. I think this started out as a tip off that their daughter was not in school, and so they're in a panic of, their daughter is missing, and so they go into the school and they say, where's our daughter? This is a shabby operation. But the entire time, the daughter is there. She is clearly, in fact, she even gets up out of her seat. They're in the classroom at this point. She gets up out of her seat, goes to her parents and says, Mommy, I'm here. But the mother's like, not now, I'm talking. Don't be rude. And then they continue to talk as if the daughter was missing. In fact, they even take her to the police station to file in a missing persons report. And everybody talks about her as if she were not in the room, and yet clearly she is. And this can also make the point of how children can be viewed as something that's as people who as they are there, but at the same time they're not there. And this expresses it very, very well. There's also another moment where there's a guy who goes up in a high-rise and with a briefcase, and he opens up the briefcase, and it turns out there's a rifle in it. And he sets it up, and he starts picking off people from the city, kind of a Charles Whitman lone gunman affair. And you think that may not be funny, but actually it kind of is, because some of the times the people who are shot, you can tell that it's fake or a bit exaggerated. There's not any kind of air of realism at all, and sometimes you hear the gunshot, sometimes you don't. Sometimes two people end up being dead at slightly different times. Like one falls and then the next one falls, as if like the bullet somehow. Either the bullet ricocheted and hit somebody else, or there were two shots that were fired in quick succession. Even though it was a single bolt-action rifle, and there's only, I think like the quickest you can get in between shots is probably, I think an experienced rifleman could probably do it in, I think 5 seconds maybe. But the point is that there's this causes this mayhem, and he's brought to trial, and he's sentenced to death. But then, because he's a famous poet, he is let go. And so he's able to walk out of the courtroom, and everybody's crying around. He's like, oh, can I have your autograph? So you have the killer poet, killer celebrity. So those are like a few. I think I probably gave you the best bits out of the film. But there's some other ones. But the whole point of it is, I mean, it's not just to kind of do whatever you want, but it does end up being a nice summation of Buñuel's career. Certainly in terms of the surreal images. In fact, the killer poet, or at least the guy with with a bolt action rifle, shooting from a window, that goes all the way back to L'Âge d'Or. L'Âge d'Or, sorry. And so this is kind of a carryover. So there are certain images that are a carryover. There are certainly certain themes that are carried over. Again, kind of the arbitrariness and the contradictions of morality. And it's not that he disapproves of morality. In fact, he was very much in favor of morality. He just wants to examine it and really ask, is this really the right way to go about it? It's very Socratic. Remember, the unexamined life is not a life worth living, and this is why he's a staple, certainly of European cinema. But so yes, unfortunately, it is out of print. Otherwise, definitely check it out. If it becomes available, I would say, and especially if you like the odd humor, the surreal humor, if you like your humor Pythonesque, it's definitely up your alley. Some bits are more interesting than others, and I think that's kind of the point. In fact, the way Carrier describes it, he wanted to kind of, it's more like story setups, where you set up the story and it looks interesting, and then it kind of ends before it gets interesting, and then the next thing gets even less interesting. So it's a play on people's expectations and what they expect to see in their narrative by skewing the whole thing and just kind of doing almost an anything goes approach. And so it's interesting in that respect. On some level, it is kind of limited, but again, I think this is more of a feature rather than a bug. So, yeah, what more can you say about it? So, the Phantom of Liberty. And until next time, take care.